And I agree with the conclusions of the report that we need to reform our global financial architecture so that we can have capital that is more capital that is concessional, that is long-term, delivered at scale, that has got speed. I would like to add that it should be delivered at quick speed, and there must be flexibility as well. The global capital markets are very tight right now. We used to be able to borrow commercially at about maximum, if it was high, at 8% per annum. Now we're borrowing at 10%, easily 12%. So clearly there's a tightening of global credit markets, and we need the support. And the reform of the global financial system is part of that support that is needed. Looking at the growth figures, you can see the highest growth in Africa is still rests with what I call the tropics: East Africa, Central Africa, West Africa. Those tend to lead almost in that order. Then number 4 is North Africa. Then number 5 is our side, which is Southern Africa. That's the growth ranking. But what was revealing is also the per capita growth rates, which shows the need for structural transformation. So Africa growing at about 2% in terms of per capita GDP growth. That shows that a lot of work needs to be done. But I think that to achieve structural transformation, we still need to focus more on the enablers. So it's infrastructure development. So investing in rail, in our road transportation, in our energy infrastructure. So this capital needs to go there, and we need long-term capital. It's not easy to invest profitable in the railway sector. It's not easy at all. It always needs government. It always needs some public-private partnership arrangements. I think unless what you do is the following. You perhaps just consider a railway company as 2 companies in one. You've got the passenger, you've got the cargo. Cargo can be commercial, and then it can be used to subsidize the passenger side. A road is a lot easier. A road investment is a lot easier. We know what to do there in terms of concessioning out the roads for 25 years on a BOT arrangement, and then through the toll fees, we're able to support the loan repayments for the SPV. For energy, I see an opportunity in when you really combine the investment in the solar space, solar energy space with climate finance. We know that, for example, that most IPP projects in solar space are profitable at tariffs of about 9 cents per kilowatt hour, 9 US cents per kilowatt hour. But we can lower that level, I think, easily to about 6 cents if we take into account the profits that the investors will make from selling carbon credits from the solar energy facility. They can do that. You can increase the internal rate of return of a project by also considering the extra yield they will earn from the voluntary market in terms of carbon credits, because you earn those carbon credits not just by creating a carbon sink, but also by not polluting in the first place. And solar energy allows you to do that. So I see opportunity. Moving on to my third point, which is on agriculture and climate response, because we need this new financial architecture to respond to climate shocks. In my region, we're affected by that right now in my country, Zimbabwe. What we should do is just invest in more dams. Where you've got potential water bodies, build a lot of dams. We have a strategy. We're building dams, a major dam in every province. So we've got about 20 major dams. The next stage now is to invest in irrigation so we can evacuate that water onto the land. We find that our drought cycles tend to have a 2-year gestation. So we know that if we have good rains and we harvest enough water, if we have a dry season, another one, we will be okay. So investing in dams is very, very critical for that transformation. My last point, my penultimate point, is on the mining sector. We have to insist on beneficiation to achieve transformation in that sector. For example, in the iron and steel industry, what we've done in Zimbabwe, we've insisted that the company must not just that's investing in iron ore, should not just invest in iron ore, export it, that ore raw, but they must beneficiate. So they are moving all the way down the value chain and are producing steel. So in the next few years, we're going to establish the largest a steel company in sub-Saharan Africa producing 1 million tons of carbon steel per annum. So it's very important to focus on the beneficiation. We're insisting again on beneficiation for the lithium sector. No raw lithium can be exported from Zimbabwe without beneficiation to the level of lithium carbonate, at least. And companies are responding and building concentrators to beneficiate that steel.
If we did not have multilateral development banks, we would need to create them. If we did not have the African Development Bank, we would need to create one. Secondly, however, since these institutions have been created, the world has changed. We're seeing with increased frequency, severity, and complexity, regional and global challenges like climate change, pandemics, fragility, conflict, and violence that are actually undermining and threatening the development gains we have made. And therefore, we absolutely need to evolve the multilateral development banks. And as our brilliant chief economist also said, countries need to evolve what they do as well. The good news is I believe that there is more political leadership around this issue. We saw it on the presidential panels yesterday. Secretary Yellen certainly has called for the evolution of the development banks. It's on the G20 agenda. So there's political momentum and there's technical work, including the African Economic Outlook, that points to the right direction. Borrowing countries want the development banks to be more responsive to their needs, to do that with greater scale, greater speed, and greater agility. There are 4 big questions that I think MDB evolution is driving towards. Number 1, are the development banks focusing on the right things? I would argue all of them are now refining their mandates to say our work must be also about helping countries tackle these global challenges, without which we will not have sustained progress on poverty reduction, without which we will not have sustained progress on inclusive, resilient growth. So that's starting to happen. Number 2, do we have the right incentives for the right things to get done? Incentives around domestic resource mobilization, incentives around private capital mobilization, incentives around the targeted high impact use of concessional resources. A major theme this week, concessional resources will always be scarce. That's a reality. And so what is the framework to think about where to place that scarce resource? On projects that have cross-border impacts, on projects where a country is making the investments, but the results, the benefits are for the region or for the world, so we need to help underwrite that investment. Thirdly, do we have the right operating models to be able to do the right things? So, for example, if you look at the challenge of fragility, conflict, and violence, often it's not an entire country that is fragile. It can be part of a country. So can the MDBs work more at the sovereign level? Can they decentralize more to be more targeted about the work that they need to do? At the same time, if we look at regional integration and the importance of something like the Lobito corridor, do the MDBs have the right approaches, skill sets to really work at the regional level in effective ways? And then finally, what people usually start with, although I think that's wrong, is do we have the right resources, the financial capacity to do the right things? And clearly, we need to scale up finance. That's both about the MDBs doing innovative things, and Vice President Asatu, you have done that here with hybrid capital, with exposure exchanges, with working with other MDBs on giving more value to callable capital. And can the shareholders contribute differently also and more to the MDBs through the concessional windows, but also through new instruments like guarantees and like hybrid capital?
This was a plan that was formulated with the participation of all the ministers of plan of the continent, together with all the development partners. And it has, in a way, solutions to all the issues that are raised, which is we need to expand our economies, first of all, and we need to increase exponentially the stakeholders in the economy, meaning that we really need to expand our economy and increase our stakeholders. It has got 7 moonshots, and one of those moonshots, which is the most important one, is to make sure that each and every African country reaches the middle income status by 2033. We cannot wait 108 years to have Africa reach the higher income country. What do we need? We need to accelerate infrastructure, agriculture, energy, human capital, be it health, education, skills development, environmental and climate change. These are all the things that we need to do. But there are so many things that we have to put in place. What we need is the programs are there, they're well articulated. We have, for example, when we talk about the energy, we have got the master plan for power for Africa, which looks at the blended renewable plus non-renewable to make sure that we get 1,200 gigawatts energy, to make sure that you have this energy to energize Africa and have all these countries out of poverty. We need resources. We have got the MDBs, yes, but we need a unified force and concentrate on areas that are of critical importance, that have got multiplier effect, that are catalytic by nature. And therefore, you know, our getting together is critical. We just came from a coordinating meeting, which was really a fantastic idea, but we have to really walk the talk.
The growth outlook is very, very positive. It has registered very good rates of economic growth. But when you look at the statistics very critically, you find that only two countries, Cote d'Ivoire and Senegal, have gone above the 7% growth rate threshold. And because of this, you relate that to GDP per capita. It was shown very clearly by Professor Orama that Africa has the lowest GDP per capita in the world. And that really makes it very, very, very difficult, because with the lower rates of economic growth, there's going to be eventually social tensions and political tensions. And hence the importance of accelerating the pace of economic growth. And in this connection, we are working with the Professor Rama, my sister here, to come up with a strategic framework on key actions to achieve inclusive growth and sustainable development across Africa, anchored on an indicated area, 7 to 10% annual growth rate of a period of 4 to 5 decades. Now, the good news with that strategic framework is that it is going to have an overall continental framework and country-by-country frameworks if countries so desire. So that should enable us to really address this issue. And this is very, very important because right now, 33 of the world's 46 least developed countries are in Africa. My last point is on the question of productive transformation, very, very, very vital. And here, the first element is to ensure that we develop a scorecard on the operation of the African Continental Free Trade Area. Let's monitor how it's delivering each year so that we know the pace of continental economic integration. And related to that is to start thinking right away on the issue of deeper economic integration anchored on the African Customs Union and common market. Because this is going to help us in removing a lot of non-tariff barriers and promoting productive transformation. And in this respect, we have produced a readiness assessment towards an African Customs Union / common market, which we are going to look at before the end of this year.
For the first time, we are hearing in the different boards of the MDBs a consistent message. And therefore, when you put Einstein's quote, it is absolutely an opportunity today as the leadership in the different MDBs are really, for the first time, talking together in granular matters, not just the vision and mission, but trying together to find solutions. And here, let me also commend Hasutu for the fantastic work on the SDRs that can actually open up the space for particularly also how the bank can leverage private sector investments in countries. Now, when I look at the report, you had several slides that had conclusions, and here I want to say that for different countries, macroeconomic stability is a necessary condition to be able to do the structural transformation. But given the successive shocks, macroeconomic stability in countries in general and in Africa in particular have become even, I don't want to say more challenging, but requiring so much policy maneuver more than any time before. And in order to achieve this macroeconomic stabilization, MDBs need to step in as well. So there is, before we go into structural transformation and trying to figure out how we can bring in regulatory or legislative reforms to drive in private sector engagement, we need to have tranquility and predictability with respect to macroeconomic stability to make that possible. So that is on the shoulders of governments for sure, but also there is a need for, if we're talking about concessional finance, maybe more budget support at the initial stages to be able to bridge this gap when we talk about macroeconomic stabilization. The other very important aspect when we're looking into this is the point of the global public goods, and how, and it's very, very important to showcase, and that is a fact, that they are also very much aligned with national goals. Because at the end of the day, if it's going to be a public investment or even trying to access concessional finance, this relationship between private or public, global public goods and its impact on inclusive, sustainable, resilient growth within the economies, this again, and I'm very happy that it was also in the slides related to a report. So that's another important aspect. Another issue that is very nicely presented in the report are the sources of external financing. When we take a look at the source of external financing, all of them, to a large extent, the ones that are more concessional have been narrowing, and those that are available are high cost. So when the debt sustainability analysis, whether it's the rating agencies or the IMF, I think there needs to be a more detailed analysis of the quality of debt, not just the quantity. If we're trying to say that concessional finance is going to help the global public goods implementation, if the concessional finance is what's needed to be able to do the climate action in the different countries, are we going to weigh that type of finance the same way we weigh the Eurobonds and the commercial finance? I don't know. I don't have an answer. As a macroeconomist, yes, we look at an aggregate number, but at the same time, there's a lot of detail in the type of debt and how it is being used and what are the impact of this, particularly on the concessional finance. So that is a question I have. I don't have an answer, but I think we need to bring this more into the discussion, the quality of debt or the different trade-offs between types of debt, and how, when we're talking about increasing more concessional, that countries are not penalized for looking into that just because of a debt ceiling that might exist. My final comment is on the talent. The macroeconomic situation in our countries, particularly in the continent, might drive away talent. And this is going to be a very, very big challenge. It already is, and it will be exacerbated. And that's why trying to achieve the macroeconomic stabilization, to be able to do the structural reforms, to bring in private sector investment, I think we need to find ways of trying to keep talent within the countries so that the productivity gains can be easier, because as we saw from the presentation, there is a gap there, and without this productivity gain, the competitiveness is going to be much less, and the FDI that we are looking for might actually be more hesitant just because the talent may not be there.
But what we've been doing thus far with the new regime in Guinea, it's focalizing on our own internal procedures. What happened to that? Because external factors is important, but internal factors reform. We are doing the big reform right now in the country. Economic reform, social reform, at the same time like political reforms. Those elements are extremely important, but diversification of economy. We are a mining country, but the biggest project right now in the world is called Simandou project, That's what we are doing. We're not only depending on the mining sector, but how we can diversify the mining sector into the economic growth, which is agriculture, which is fishery, which is transportation. That project, even though it's mining, but we are doing infrastructure project, that's going to create job for the young people, because we have millions of African or Guinean going to Europe, but the only way to get them in the country, you have to create job. That we are doing 650-kilometer railway, at the same time deep port development, that are creating more job for Guinean. The second point is about debt sustainability. Yes, we are very fortunate in Guinea because our debt to GDP is about 39%, compared to the region, which is about 6%. We have a lot of leeways that we can borrow, but we need to make sure that the international community help us in order to have structural reform, debt reform, in order to move forward. Because if you look into the, some kind of financial blending, it is important that we use some blending financial mechanism by OECDs. You know, OECD has been like, since 2020, they are giving only 85%. We want to move from 85% to 95% when it comes to the concessional loan. But it's extremely important that also we look into the ECA financing. There's another area. If we can couple the ECA financing with the concessional loan, we can have a proper project. So ECA financing is extremely important for us. So likely what we need from the international community is very clear, actionable roadmap for reforms. Those are the elements that we need in order to carry forward. Lastly is the system that we are in right now. We talk about debt, we talk about all these elements, but we need to transform our resources in the country. Because for many years, we've been taking our resources out of the country. If we can transform our resources inside the country, we'll create jobs, we'll add value, we'll have transformation. That creates more opportunity to other enterprises, other companies in terms of energy sector. Because you can't transform bauxite, you can't transform iron ore if you don't have energy. So therefore, that gives opportunity to companies around the world. And lastly, the last point is a cooperation and coordination between agencies. If African Development Bank, we need to collaborate with IMF, World Bank, by regional development agencies, and also best practices that have been done in Asia, we can couple that one in our country to move forward.
We have to look on the quality of growth. Economic growth and the outlook is giving us hope. Is not enough. We have to look on the economic growth per capita. And we really have to have a closer look why there is such a big difference in between the income situation of different parts of societies. So the question of inequality inside a society, I think, is crucial for coming up with better ideas for solving poverty problems. There were some hints in value-add production, for example, in investing in human capital and so on. But I think that needs close reflection, how we come to better per capita growth. And maybe only one sentence on that. We have also to have a look on gender in that aspect, because we cannot exclude the potential of 50% of society. That has a big impact of growth, economic growth, and also has a big impact on how we really fight poverty on a long run. If we don't take them, take gender seriously, I don't think we find the right answers to that issue. Second point I want to comment on is the global financial architecture debate. And I'm very thankful to Professor Rama that you were pointing out the two pillars, basically. The one which has to be done domestically, and the other question, what has to be done on an international level. And both sides are important. They are equally important. I want to underline that. I'm very thankful for your comments on domestic resource mobilization. It's tax, yes, but it's not only tax. And by the way, it's not only VAT. There's a broad range of taxes which are not so heavily infecting at the end of the day than the poorest in a society. So we have to think about the broad range of taxes. It's about, you mentioned it quite frankly, corruption. So I quote you on that. I think it's very, very good that you were mentioning those topics. It's about illicit flows. So we have to realize that there has to be done a lot on that. On the international level, we have a lot of homework to do also, and I would agree we have to really work on debt release and do it differently. It was striking what you were saying about the private creditors in that case. We have to work for including private creditors in debt release and become more become quicker also with the G20 common framework, because we have to address in appropriate time frame also the needs of the countries. If it's coming to the access to finance as a whole, my government is very much supporting the reform of the World Bank and also of the MDBs, because we need a broader range of possibilities to finance, on the one side, the issue of, like you were mentioning, global public goods, which are also, of course, domestic public goods. I think that's important. But don't do it on the then stopping or hindering another financing in development issues. So we need to broaden that spectrum, and therefore we need the reform of World Bank and the MDBs. And I would always subscribe that we need a strong African development bank. That's why we really engaged also in the callable capital issue yesterday. That is a hint that we really want to support that. I also could agree very much on what was said yesterday, that we have to calculate things differently. Leveraging, for example, Africans' natural resources was a big topic on yesterday's debate, and we would agree very much to have a different framing than, which is also at the end of the day counting into the rating debate. Last point, I try to be really quick, last point I want to make. We have to get simpler and easier with access to climate finance, because we know that it's also a part of how administration can handle things if they can get access to climate financing. And we have to become easier in that. We have to become more supportive with, for example, climate action window from the AfDB and technical assistance, but also from the international framework. We have to become easier in that.
I would like to just focus perhaps on what do we need to achieve the economic transformation that we all aspire to. I think there is a joint responsibility at multiple levels. So at domestic level, we need to ensure that we're crowding in the private sector, creating an enabling environment, reducing policy and regulatory uncertainty. We need to also ensure that there is better debt management. We need to build capacity to design and structure the innovative instruments that Kevin has been referring to. So we need to make sure that we're doing our part, and that also includes ensuring high returns for each dollar that we spend, that we're getting the highest returns. So really ensuring expenditure efficiency. And of course, we need to enhance domestic resource mobilization. We need to ensure that we are really curbing leakages even in taxation, meaning, the tax exemptions that we have, the concessions that we have. We need to have really tough discussions at a national level, of what are we getting in terms of returns for the revenues that we are losing. But at the same time, we need to make sure that we are leveraging huge regional opportunities. We have the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement that we need to advance its implementation, and we need to focus on building regional value chains so that we can create better jobs, higher wages, and actually tap our natural resources, be it renewable resources or green minerals. This is the future. We need to shift, our growth paradigm. We can no longer export our development opportunities by exporting raw material. If we do that,
can we give that a round of applause, please? Thank you.